Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. We're doing this one a little bit later than usual. We are recording this on Monday morning, the night after the Lakers-Grizzlies game. I was traveling last night, taking my son back, so spending some family time. Did not end up getting back until almost 11, so decided to prioritize getting some sleep, a rare little off night, and then going live today. But shout out to the chat, shout out to everybody in the late night gang. Appreciate you guys, and appreciate you guys tuning in today. So Lakers won 120-114 in this back-to-back baseball series style home situation with the Memphis Grizzlies. They improved to 22-11 at the 33 game mark, and they are now number 3 in the West, with Jokic going down in Denver, and Denver going on a little bit of a slide right now, and Houston losing Alperen Şengün. The Lakers have ascended from number 5 in the West to number 3 in the West, and it's all jumbled, and it could change at any given moment, but the Lakers are still in the thick of the home court advantage, jostling in the West, and they are now one loss behind San Antonio. So if San Antonio drops a game coming up here and LA continues to win, especially as their schedule gets a little bit easier here, then that's where I think LA could potentially be the number 2 seed, looking at mid-January or so. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, leave a 5-star review. Shout out to everybody in the chat. We got Giovanni here from Late Night Gang from Europe. Appreciate it. Two Sizzle says Midday Gang. That's more like it. Kevin Cambridge, only 14 likes. Let's run it up, y'all. Yes, Iceberg, hit that like button. Salute Jovan Mods and chat. Yes, shout out to the mods, shout out to the chat. All right, let's get into it here. Buha's big picture is like, in some ways, I felt this was a continuation to a degree of some of the takeaways from the previous Lakers-Grizzlies game. And I think that the biggest thing for me, I mentioned this as a takeaway last time, not as my big picture takeaway, but this has now become the big picture takeaway coming off of, I think, not just these two games, but also the Detroit game, is Jake LaRavia is making a strong case to be the Lakers' 5th starter. And I think the Lakers are in a really interesting spot right now in terms of what they do once Rui comes back, because presumably Rui would come back and replace Jake, because that's the way that the starting group has been when the Lakers have been down one of the stars. It's been Marcus is the first guy that comes in and replaces somebody, and then now Jake has been that secondary guy. But before Rui went down, whenever they had been in this situation, it had been Rui and Marcus as the two starters. But I think the way that Jake is playing right now is really making this decision difficult for JJ. And it's been now back-to-back 20-point games from Jake. So against Memphis, he had 26, 5, and 4, 1 steal, 9 for 16 shooting, 4 for 10 on threes. Of note, those 10 threes were a season high in 3-point attempts, 4 for 4 at the free throw line. Lakers were a team best plus 15 in Jake's 35 minutes. And one big thing we've talked about with Jake has been the decision-making in terms of the shot pass decision-making, and just sort of sometimes he could be a little passive, or even a little reluctant to look for his own shot. And he'll have these games, right? I think the pinnacle of this is the Minnesota game, but even now recently these couple of Memphis games, where when he does look for his own shot, you see what the upside is, and you see he can drop 20 plus points. And I don't know that outside of the big three, Jake is probably the best among the role players to be a consistent threat in terms of looking for his own shot and also having these types of outbursts, right? Like Marcus, it's more so we've seen when Marcus has a big night, he can get downhill, he can hit floaters, he can hit runners, but for the most part, it's like Marcus hits a certain amount of threes because teams are just ignoring him. And then with Nick Smith, he's a little bit of a wild card there, right? But we've seen now that in a little bit of a more consistent role, he is not. That's not a nightly thing for Nick Smith. It is maybe once every few games he kind of goes off. And then, Dalton just has not been able to carve out a consistent role and has not been able to get over some of his defensive limitations. So just like looking at and then with just the way they use Rui, like I think Jake is a better shot creator, self-creator than Rui is. I think Rui's much more of an off-ball catch and shoot cutter, etc. So I think Jake, the way he's been playing offensively, but also the way that he's playing defensively, like he to me is the best blend. I've said this since they signed him. He's the best blend on this roster of like two-way wing play because again, with Marcus, there are some real offensive concerns with the shooting, with the turnovers, and sometimes with the decision-making. And then with Rui, we know about the defensive limitations. Jake is the best blend between the two. And I think he showed that. Again, the Detroit game was not like the best performance overall from like a production perspective, but Jake is making a strong case here. So looking at the ways that LA used him, I mean, off the ball, especially on the weak side, he's been able to, again, got up a season high in 3-point attempts, hit 4 of them. And he is due for some regression as a shooter. He shot 42% on threes this year, has been shooting in the low 30s all season. He is due to regress closer to the mid to high 30s. But aside from that, like I just like the process of him taking those shots and taking them quickly. I went back and rewatched every one of his shots and like pretty much every possession with the starters, and it just stood out to me like the confidence that he's playing with right now and the assertiveness of if he's open, he's shooting it. And that has not consistently been the case this season. So I really like that from Jake. But then it's not just been that, it's also been attacking closeouts. And because of the way that Memphis's roster is constructed and just sort of who is available, they were a lot of times putting smaller guys on Jake, and Jake was able to attack those closeouts, turn them into post-ups, and then get some quick baskets along the baseline. So I think he, again, blends some of what you have with Rui in terms of the catch and shoot ability, in terms of the cutting, in terms of the getting out in transition, also playing bully ball, mismatch hunting, all that stuff. But then you also have the defensive side where I didn't think this was his best defensive performance. I thought he got beat off the dribble a bit. And if I do want to nitpick or present maybe the counter, I mean, I think there's two clear counters to Jake starting, which are one, like he can go through these periods where he's not as confident or not as assertive. We'll see. Maybe he's turned a corner and this is the Jake we're going to see the rest of the season. But he needs to show this, I think, for a longer stretch, in my opinion. But two, there is a foot speed issue with him where I think especially when we saw him on Wells or we saw him on Coward, those guys just had an athletic advantage, like GG Jackson, those types of guys. They're just too quick and athletic and explosive. So I like him more. Like Kawhi is a guy who he defends really well in the couple of matchups we've seen this season. When it's a slower guy who's going to more so go to craft and footwork and like trying to leverage their strength, I think that's where Jake is at his best matching up against those guys. The quicker guys, he is not as good against. And my one fear with this and why I still would lean on the Marcus side of who should be the fifth starter is just that I think Marcus is better against quicker play. Like Marcus has his limitations, of course, too, especially on the offensive end. But I do think Marcus holds up better against quicker players. And that would be kind of the one thing where I think you can get away with a wider range of matchups for Marcus compared to Jake, who I think is better specifically against forwards and like less athletic forwards. Whereas putting him on guards, I don't love that. So I think, I guess to cut to the chase of like what I think about him as the fifth starter, I still think I would prioritize it. Marcus, Jake, Honestly, Vando and then Rui. I think the way that the Lakers are looking at it, it's still going to be Rui for the time being. But Jake's making a real case for it. And if JJ ends up keeping him in the starting lineup and bringing Rui off the bench, I would support that. And I think that would make a lot of sense. I just think my one concern would be you're still putting a lot of the guard backcourt defensive responsibility on Austin's shoulders. And I think with Marcus, again, you could play him on 1s, 2s, and 3s. And it's sort of like, if there's some 4s, all right, you put LeBron on that guy, and LeBron just has more of a defensive role that evening. But 1s, 2s, and 3s, you could put Marcus. I don't feel the same way about Jake. I think he's more of a 3s and 4s type defender, maybe some 2s, but I don't love it. So I just think, again, if you're starting him, you're placing too much on Austin's shoulders. But again, Jake he has a two-way ceiling that I don't think Rui has, and I don't think Marcus has. So if he continues playing like this, it's undeniable that he should be a starter and should be playing in the high 30s, if not around the high 20s, if not around the low 30s. So I just think that's been the biggest thing really over the last 2 games has been his reemergence and really taking that spot and saying, like, it's not just a Rui versus Marcus conversation. I belong in the mix. And again, I think he does have a two-way ceiling. We'll see how low the floor is moving forward, and it has been low at times. But he does provide a certain defensive like energy and just like JJ was talking about, he might be their most consistent defender all season, and I think that's notable. So yeah, I think like that's my biggest takeaway from the last couple games, but I think last night cemented it that Jake should be in the mix to remain in the starting group and potentially be the 5th starter moving forward, barring, of course, a potential trade. In terms of notable performers, just mentioned Jake, but we have to go to Luka, 36, 9, and 8. I'm going to touch on Luka and LeBron, one of my takeaways, so I'm not going to get too much into their performances, but 36, 9, and 8, 10 to 20 shooting, 4 for 10 on threes, 12 for 13 on free throws. Also had a block, only 3 turnovers. I really liked Luka's performance tonight. Again, I'll touch on that in a second. LeBron, 26, 7, and 10. 1 steal, 1 turnover, 8 for 14 shooting, 2 for 7 on threes, 8 for 10 on free throws. So those guys will be touched on in takeaway number 1. Deandre Ayton had a bounce back performance. He will also be touched on in one of the takeaways. 15 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 1 turnover, 6 of 8 shooting, 3 for 6 at the free throw line. Marcus, 6 points, 1 for 5 shooting, 0 for 3 on threes, 4 for 4 at the free throw line, 1 rebound, 4 assists, a block, and a turnover. And then off the bench, Vando, I thought, had a really nice game. The Lakers closed with him over Marcus for a bit there in like crunch time. 7.7 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, a couple turnovers, some nice finishing from Vando and cutting along the baseline, finished a lob, which we almost never see from him. DK, I thought, had a really rough performance, and he was given an opportunity here in these 2 Memphis games. I don't think he did anything to earn more playing time. If anything, I think it was further confirmation that he should not be in the rotation. He had several mistakes defensively in terms of botching switches. He did hit, he remembered an ATO. That's progress, and actually hit a 3 off an ATO, but 1 for 5 shooting, 1 for 4 on threes. Did have a couple rebounds and a steal, but also had a couple turnovers, and that's not even factoring in some of the defensive concerns with him. So it's just DK is, I don't know. I don't think he's a rotation player. Jackson had a tough game in terms of picked up a tech and had a couple of offensive fouls and, but at one point made a free throw, but I thought it was good activity on the glass, 6 rebounds in only 14 minutes. And I thought he was fine defensively. Nick Smith had a rough night, 0 points on 0 for 4 shooting, and continues to show that he is a feast or famine type player off the bench. In terms of stat of the night, I think several things to look at, but I'm going to continue going off of my stat of the night from the first Memphis matchup. 33 of 41 at the free throw line. The Lakers nearly had as many made free throws as made field goals. They made 38 shots and made 33 free throws. So they just continue to put pressure on the rim, get downhill, draw fouls. That was a huge factor tonight. Looking at the foul disparity, 31 fouls for the Grizzlies, 18 for the Lakers. That partly can Memphis had 6 players with 4 or more fouls, including 4 players with 5 or more fouls. Just a really tough night for Memphis defensively in that regard. And then takeaway number 1 for me is the Luka LeBron balance. And this was something I touched on last game, but I thought this was a continuation of that. And a big thing for me was I really liked Luka's performance. Like, I thought that this might have been my favorite Luka performance since his return from Slovenia. Again, 36, 9, and 8, 10 for 20 shooting, 4 for 10 on threes, 12 for 13 on free throws. And part of the reason why I really liked Luka's performance so much, and I went back, watched every field goal attempt, watched every assist, watched every turnover, etc. Like, he had a relatively sluggish start to this game in terms of all 3 of his turnovers were in the first 7 minutes. He was taking some pull-up and step-back threes that he was missing. Like, he missed the pull-up 3, then he hit a step back, and then he took a couple more that he missed. But I thought progressively, like, it started shifting more toward the most efficient version of him, which is him getting downhill relentlessly. That was why he attempted 13 free throws. So that's 33 free throws across the 2 games against Memphis. But like, after the 3 early turnovers, he didn't turn the ball over the rest of the game and had a really nice playmaking game. I thought was getting off the ball early, was playing off of the ball. He had a couple of catch and shoot threes that he hit, but also, another attempt. So he went 2 for 3 on catch and shoot threes, but he also ceded control of the offense to LeBron. LeBron was the primary creator and playmaker in the second half. So I think, like, I just really liked Luka's performance, and he still put up the numbers. He was very efficient. And again, 3 turnovers compared to some of his recent performances. That is a step in the right direction, but it felt like he was a little bit more deliberate in terms of picking his spots. And I say all that to say, like, he still had 20 shots and 13 free throws, so he was very involved offensively. But I just really liked his downhill attacking and coming off of pin downs. I really liked LA using him off of the ball more. But then I also thought when they were doubling him again, I think 2 of the 3, or might have actually been all 3 turnovers were off of doubles where they're showing high, blitzing him, and then he's turning the ball over out of that. But then I thought that the patience and sometimes instead of going for the home run pass, just swinging it to the corner or resetting the ball and going into a different action. Like, I just thought he pushed all the right buttons, and it was a masterful performance from him offensively. The only nitpick I have is I think some of the step back and pull up threes are still a little bit too high. He started this game, he finished 4 for 10, but sometimes when we look at the overall box score, it's lacking context. So he started 2 for 8 and he was not having a good 3-point shooting performance overall, then hits 2 huge ones late in the game. And again, that's the balance we talk about with Luka, where it's like, he does have such confidence that he can make any shot because he can make any shot. And if he doesn't take those shots late, maybe the Lakers don't win this game, or it ends up being a little bit closer and it actually goes into the final minute in terms of determining the game. So it is a fine balance of, like, you want Luka playing with a certain level of confidence, but you also want to factor in, like, hey, maybe the shot isn't falling tonight. But I thought he struck a really nice balance tonight, and this was one of my favorite Luka performances in a while. But looking at LeBron, I think LeBron continued a lot of what worked against Memphis last game: 26, 7, and 10, 8 for 14 shooting, so another efficient night from him. And 5 of the 6 misses were beyond the arc. And LeBron's another one. Well, it's really both of them. They both deal with similar issues in terms of, I think they can be too 3-point reliant or too confident in their 3-point shot, and then they both can struggle with turnovers. And so, like, LeBron actually went 6 for 7 inside the arc. It was the 2 for 7 beyond the arc that ended up hurting him in terms of his overall efficiency, but did hit a couple of catch and shoot threes. I think that's a big thing for LeBron is, especially at this point, I have much more confidence in his catch and shoot ability than I do with his pull up or step back or just off the dribble 3-point shooting. 8 for 10 on free throws. So he did get to the free throw line a lot. That's a lot of free throws for LeBron. But the Lakers really shifted things where 7 of his 10 assists and 18 of his 26 points came in the second half. And LA ran the offense way more through LeBron than they did through Luka. And I think, especially with Austin out for most of this month, if not the entire month, this is a key stretch of the season for figuring out the Luka LeBron partnership. And I think they continue to show progress, right? Where LeBron is not operating in the way, like he will operate as a pick and roll ball handler in some of these Banshee groups, right? But he's operating a lot more as a screener, as a roller, as a post up threat, as a guy trying to get out in transition with deep seals and whatnot. Whereas Luka, he's obviously the primary usage guy, but I think Luka's been adapting to playing off of the ball more and sometimes being like, again, a couple of his catch and shoot threes were pretty deep along that left slot where he's just spotting up from like 28 feet. And that's not something we're necessarily like accustomed to Luka doing consistently. So I think that Jake is his own storyline because the Lakers have needed, I think someone like they've needed someone to go grab that 5th starter spot in terms of really earning it. And I think Marcus has been a strong contender all season and again has been my choice, but Jake is playing at a level that I don't know if like Rui or Marcus can get to consistently. So that's one thing. But so that's been like my biggest storyline over the last couple games. But the second thing that I think we have to continue to monitor here is just LeBron and Luka, I think, really starting to figure out their partnership. We've seen a little bit more 2-man game between them, especially in crunch time on that left side of the floor, empty corner pick and rolls, and then going into LeBron as a post up threat or Luka spotting up. And then, JJ was talking about some 88 action, which I'm not quite sure what that is, but I've been trying to go through the film and figure it out. I'm still not sure. I mean, really the only thing I could think of was that there were several, like they've been having just almost spaced out to the 2 wings, 2 corners, and then having someone in the middle of the floor trying to drive and kick and attack out of that. And there was a couple of attacks for kick out passes to Luka. In general, there's more driving kick offense for LA, which I think has been a positive. In terms of takeaway number 2, DA's bounce back. I thought it was a really solid bounce back performance for DeAndre Ayton. Again, 15 points, 8 rebounds, a steal, and a block. I will say I thought through the first 3 quarters, I thought he was much more engaged and interested offensively than defensively. I did not love his defensive performance through the first 3 quarters. And I thought you saw a clear gap until crunch time. Like crunch time, he was awesome defensively. That's when he had 2 of his 3 blocks. And I thought he locked in defensively during crunch time to a point it almost erases the first 43 minutes or whatever. But I thought there was a tangible difference again when DA was out there versus Jackson defensively in terms of I thought they were giving up fewer offensive rebounds. They were protecting the rim more. They were collapsing the paint better. And just the overall energy level, the motor was not quite there defensively from DA, in my opinion, through the first 3 quarters. It was there offensively. And he got 2 of the Lakers' first 4 buckets. First play of the game, they were on a pick and roll, empty side pick and roll with Luka and DA. They trap Luka, hits DA on the roll, goes into a little hook shot move against Jaren Jackson. They got him for multiple lobs. LeBron and DA have this really nice chemistry where LeBron's posting up and DA just flashes into the middle of the paint. LeBron hits him, and one of them he got a dunk, one of them he got a little floater. But that's been something that's been building, has been those 2 in their chemistry. So offensively, I thought it was return to form for DA. Still only took 8 shots, so the Lakers could do a better job of involving him even more, but did attempt 6 free throws. And then But I thought defensively was where I was a little disappointed through the first 3 quarters of it. It still felt like the same version of DA we had been seeing the last week or so. But then he really locked in when LA closed with him. So again, I want to acknowledge that he was incredible in crunch time. And but my one thing, I'll just reiterate this with him that, because after we spoke about it, coming off of the previous Memphis game, JJ talked about it at practice and said that DeAndre was frustrated because he wasn't as involved offensively. And DA talked about it after the game, saying that, big men can't pass themselves the ball and that he's doing his best to still play with a certain amount of energy. I think this is the first bump in the road in the DA Lakers partnership, and maybe it ends up being the only bump in the road, or maybe there's a couple more small bumps in the road. But I think the center position, as I talked about last game, is just so important, especially defensively, that I don't think it's okay for him to, there's the human element component here of it's okay for him to be upset he's not getting the ball. It's okay for him to voice his displeasure to JJ, to his teammates. That is totally fine. That happens all the time in the NBA. And that is normal. It's particularly normal for offensive minded bigs who aren't a Jokic, Şengün, super high usage type of, if you are someone who's a bit more reliant on your playmakers setting you up, you're going to maybe go through some stretches during the season where you're not as involved offensively and you get a bit frustrated. So that part I do not hold against Ayton. What I do hold against him is that I don't think his effort and motor can fluctuate to the degree that it has recently. And it basically be pouting of, I'm not getting the ball, so I'm not going to try. That's where the themes of the season of championship mindset and championship habits, right? That's not a championship mindset or championship habit, right? So that's where I think DA has to look at himself in the mirror and be like, yes, I have a case to be frustrated, and I totally understand that, but he's too important to this team and really is their best rim protector and it's between him and Luka and LeBron, I guess, for best rebounder, but Ayton should be their best rebounder. He's too important with the defensive rebounding and with the rim protection to take plays off, to take quarters off, to take halves off, to take games off. And to go back to a point I've made over the past week or so, he does have an alarming sample size of not playing well in some of these bigger matchups, with the exception of the San Antonio, the first San Antonio matchup. So I would like to see, and I think in all matchups he's also been phased out of the offense. So I don't know how much of correlation versus causation, et cetera, with that. But I would like to see a consistent motor from him, which he, to be fair, he has had for most of the season. This has been more of a recent thing, with the exception of, again, some of those random big matchup performances. But I don't think his effort level should be tied to his offensive involvement. And if it is, then that opens up a different question about is he the right long-term fit? Because I don't think, with what the Lakers need around Luka and Austin, I don't think you could have guys that you're questioning the effort or motor of around those guys long term. I think you need self-motivating players like a Marcus Smart, like a Jake LaRavia, like a Jared Vanderbilt. Those are the types of, like even a Jackson Hayes. Those guys are going to bring a certain level of motor and energy and just tenacity to the game. And they're going to make mistakes. They're going to get fouls. That they're going to, those guys are all very flawed to varying degrees. But what you're getting with those guys to a certain extent. With DA, I just think that was a bit of a yellow flag, to put it mildly. And I think moving forward, he needs to not let this affect his play to the degree it has recently. And if it does, again, then that's a different conversation in terms of the big picture. And then final thing before we get into the Q&A, just the injury update. So Austin is, of course, not going to be back on this road trip, but we found out Rui isn't going to be back on the road trip as well. So Lakers have at Tuesday or at New Orleans on Tuesday, at San Antonio on Wednesday. They have a road back to back. So for those keeping track at home, another situation where a Lakers player is out and expected to be back within a certain amount of time and then is not. So that, make of that what you want. But so Rui's going to end up missing a little bit longer than initially anticipated, and then Gabe might be back at some point on the road trip. He practiced on Saturday. But with all that said, let's get into the super chat or the questions. And first with super chats. Ryan Lucas, thank you for the super chat. Now convinced LA's number one target should be Dillon Brooks and Day'Ron Sharpe. If you could get Clowney from the Nets, also great. Luka, AR, Brooks, Braun, Sharpe. I really like Dillon Brooks and Day'Ron Sharpe. I am pro LA going after both of these guys. I'm sure you guys have seen the Austin Reeves for Dillon Brooks trade that has been floated out there by Boogie Cousins and co-signed by Lou Williams. I could not disagree more with that trade proposal and think that is selling incredibly low on Austin Reeves. And the Lakers would not, I could just tell you, the Lakers would not do that. So I thought that was a funny, it's been a funny trade discourse throughout the day today. But yeah, I mean, if there's a way to get Dillon Brooks with some combination of Rui and a first, I would do that. I think the one thing the Lakers have to really weigh here is just like how do they view Dillon in terms of being like a longer term fit. I don't think you want to make a short-sighted like 1 to 2 year type move. And Brooks is only 29, so he is going to be turning 30 next year, but he still fits. I think like that player archetype I think can be good into their early to mid 30s. So I don't really have concerns about where Dillon Brooks will be like 2 years from now. And then Day'Ron, I've been a fan of Day'Ron. I think your trade proposal, I would guess, is sending out Ayton. I don't think if Ayton's still on the team, I think he would start over Sharpe. But if Ayton's in the trade, that's a different story. But I think Day'Ron to me, what I really like about him is he would check the box of, I've talked about LA needing like a burly's the wrong word because it has certain connotations, but like a brawnier center option and a guy who's a little bit stronger, a little bit nastier, a little bit more physical. And they don't really have that between Ayton, Jackson, and Maxey. So I think Day'Ron checks that box and would give you some versatility at the 5 spot that you don't necessarily have, or just a different look at the 5 spot that you don't necessarily have. So that I think would be a nice addition to LA's bench. And I think he'd give Jackson a real push there in terms of being the backup 5. And maybe he does ultimately play himself into a larger role or closing in certain matchups or whatever. But I do really like both these guys. And I also like Clowney too, but I'm not, I don't know what a Sharpe trade looks like. Is that something with Dalton? I'm not quite sure. Like, I don't know if Dalton and a second is enough for Brooklyn, but that seemed like that would be my preferred trade. NBA Enjoyer, thank you for the super chat. Missed your content last night, Brate. I appreciate it. I know several people reach out about that, and it's always humbling and flattering to have that response. And, I wish I could have gone live last night, but it was just not in the cards. But I'm live now, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. Over under 60%. JJ makes him the 5th when we are healthy soon. Also, Smart and Rui are a sick first 2 subs, in my opinion. I assume this is in relation to Jake. I would say maybe I'm being too pessimistic, and Jake has just played himself into a certain role here. But I think, and the interesting thing is that this tests some of what JJ has said with starting and whatnot, where JJ has said he doesn't like guys like losing their role or moving to the bench or whatever while the team's winning and while the team's playing well. And the Lakers have now won 3 of 4. They are back to number 3 in the West. And so you could look at that one in two ways, right? Of Rui has been the primary starter when healthy, but Jake is also, I think, playing better than I would say. I mean, you guys could correct me if you're wrong. I think Jake's last 2 games are probably better than any game Rui has had this season, off the top of my head. I especially factoring in the two-way performance. I don't know that Rui has had a better or even comparable. Like, he of course hit the game winner in Toronto, and he's been LA's best and most consistent shooter, which cannot be overlooked. But I think Jake just has a two-way ceiling that Rui doesn't come close to. It's just doing it consistently. I would say under 60% that Jake stays as the 5th starter. But if I'm wrong, then I think that's a positive. Like, one thing we talked about last game was JJ shifting the rotation a bit and saying, hey, Jackson, you're out playing DA, close over him. And some of the rotation decisions he's made recently have indicated he is willing to make some tough decisions. And if players aren't playing well, he will prioritize the players who are playing better. So I would say it would be uncharacteristic of JJ to start Jake over Rui based on everything we know and based on Rui's preference to start. But if he does, I will give JJ a lot of credit for making a very difficult decision. And look, maybe it is like Rui returns, and because he missed a certain amount of time, he comes off the bench for like a game. And then maybe if he plays a certain way off the bench and the Lakers win that game, maybe that, like, JJ's just like, hey, why tweak this? And maybe that's the way to kind of spin it of we won with him coming off the bench. We put him in certain lineups, or we featured him more offensively compared to the starters. But we'll see. I'm still a bit skeptical. I also think Marcus is going to be in the mix for the potential 5th starter spot. Like, Marcus didn't have the best game last night, but Marcus has been playing well. He has been leading this team in plus minus, net rating, all that stuff. So I think Marcus is also heavily in the mix, and again, would probably be my choice, but I think it should be between Jake and Marcus, and I think there are pros and cons in both directions. Lee Baggy, thank you for the super chat. Buha, I need you to play like this till Reeves is back. You know what? I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try to play with a certain level of confidence and assertion and make my threes and rack my closeouts and get to the basket. And yeah, I'm going to do my best. But in all seriousness, like, this is exactly what the Lakers have needed from Jake. He's not going to drop 20 points every single night, but I think in a lot of ways, he's been able to do what the Lakers want Rui to do offensively. And then you factor in the defensive side of it, and it's just a valuable player on a $6 million contract. Flying Grajendex, thank you for super chat. Thoughts on KCP? I've been thinking about KCP, and I did obviously view the last couple of games through the lens of how KCP would fit. I would be open to KCP, especially if, let's say, hypothetically, the 3-and-D market just doesn't play out the way that the Lakers anticipated it playing out, or they just don't have the requisite assets to get the type of player that they want. Looking at on the season, he's shooting 41%, 36% on threes. I mean, he's not really a big stats production guy. Is shooting 43% on threes over his last 10. So he has been, ascending as a shooter. More recently, I thought shot well, especially in that first matchup with LA. My thing with KCP is he has regressed a bit as a shooter. If you look at where he was at, he had the stretch from the title season through 2024. He shot between 38 and 42% every season. So that was 5 straight seasons shooting between 38 and 42%, which is exactly what you want from that 3-and-D type perimeter player. The last year he shot 34% in Orlando. This year he's at 36% in Memphis. So those aren't like bad percentages. 36% on the Lakers would actually be pretty good, especially with the shot quality you're getting with Luka and Austin and LeBron. I just think he has regressed offensively a bit. And then defensively, I don't think is quite the same level of player. Like he is 32, about to be 33 in February, a month and a half from now. So if you could flip Gabe and Maxey for KCP, I'm open to that. I don't know that I think he's necessarily better than Marcus or Jake. I think he's at a similar level or tier to those guys. They each have different strengths. I think KCP's quicker than both of those guys and might be better against the guard types, but I do think, especially as he's aged, he's not as good at guarding up as he used to be. So it is like each player has their, and I'm looking at it from a defensive perspective because I think that's the primary thing you want from that fifth starter is a certain level of defense, especially with how bad LA's defense has been. I still think Marcus is probably the highest ceiling defender of the three and the most versatile defender of the three, but I like KCP. And again, if it is swapping out Gabe for KCP and because he's making around $20 million. If it's Gabe and Maxey for KCP, I think that's a win. And if he's playing 20 to 24 minutes a night as a bench player, I think he's a useful player and a useful shooter who also he's been a part of 2 championship teams. He's got the rapport with LeBron. I think he would love playing with Luka. So yeah, I'm for KCP. I would not give up a first for him. And I don't think I'd give up sure, if they want Dalton, I would throw in Dalton. I'd throw in a second, right? But I think some combination of Gabe, Maxey, Dalton in a second is as far as I would go. If that's not enough, then I think I'd probably pass on KCP. But if you could get him for like relatively cheap, I would be interested in that. Christian, Worthy never gave Luka his flowers. Any idea why? Thank you for the super chat. It's a good question. To be completely honest, I'm not as tapped in with like the pre and post game show in terms of I'm either at the games or pre-game. I'm typically like watching other games or taking notes or whatever. And then post game, I'm immediately into taking notes, rewatching parts of the game or trying to, if I'm not at the game, then trying to listen to like the post game pressers and just see what I can accumulate. So I'm not as tapped in on the pre and post and halftime show. My guess would be, I think like Luka is heliocentric and it has obviously worked, but I think with how guys used to play and Worthy is a bit more of an old school guy, that was not the style of play in the 80s, right? Like it was, especially like the point guard position was more pass first with Worthy having a front row seat with Magic Johnson. So that would be my assumption would be that just Luka and like the evolution of the primary ball handler turning into a scoring guard first and then a passing guard second, and also being so high usage that might just not be James Worthy's cup of tea. But I don't know. I'm not as tapped in on that, to be completely honest. Ryan Lucas, thank you for the super chat. Ishbia just tweeted no Brooks trade even for AR. Well, I respectfully, I'm going to say that so there's a couple things here, because in a vacuum, AR is undeniably a more valuable asset than Brooks. I think if you're looking at Phoenix's roster, there would be some overlap with a Reeves Booker backcourt to a degree. So I guess you could argue from a Phoenix perspective, like having Austin, I think Austin can run the point. Like they could kind of be like co-primary ball handlers with Booker and Austin. And Booker has really developed as a playmaker and a ball handler and as more of a primary guy in that regard. But I still think Booker coming off pin downs or post ups or playing off the ball still has a lot of value. And you could do that at a higher level with Austin, even compared to a player like a Colin Gillespie, let's say. But I also think like I mean, what is HBO supposed to say? I mean, he could just say nothing, but he's not going to be like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to trade Brooks, but like Austin, I would consider that for him. Like sometimes when, and I know you're just sharing what he said, so I'm not, going at you by any means. I think sometimes when people react to what people say publicly, it's like no owner or coach or GM is going to be like, I want to trade this player or like, I don't want to trade this player, but I would trade him for a couple of people, right? Like it's just politically, that's not how these things go. So I think it's nice of him to stand up for Brooks and say they don't want to trade him. And I believe him. And like, I would not trade Brooks if I'm Phoenix, but if the Lakers called about Austin, I think you have to strongly consider that. And I think Phoenix would be much closer to saying yes, if not just outright say yes, than LA would. Rich, thank you for the super chat. DA pouting is really bugging me, not the Laker way. Yeah, and I was a bit surprised by, there was a lot of like DA defense in terms of people defending his actions or his feelings. And again, I think he's totally entitled to feel the way he feels, but I don't think it should come at the cost of his effort and his defensive focus and his overall motor. Because when DA plays the way he's played recently, the Lakers just don't have a chance against good teams. Like the way they need him to play is that San Antonio game where he matched, if not just straight up outplayed Victor Wembanyama for a lot of that game, or certainly in crunch time. So I was a bit surprised by the reaction from some of like a lot of people defending him. And it's totally justifiable for him to be upset and to even pout a bit and be like, hey, I'm not getting the ball. I'm used to a certain usage. Earlier in the season, I was getting the ball. I'm sure there's also a human element of the team is losing and he's not like that. That's the other part here. But when you're losing and you don't get the ball as much, that's when the finger pointing or the displeasure can rear itself even more. But again, there needs to be a baseline level of focus. And I felt like JJ let him off the hook a little bit. And this is where, again, I made this point, I think it was last stream, where one of my several criticisms of this current coaching staff has been the selective bias, in my opinion, in terms of, I think there are players, specifically DA, Rui, and Gabe are sort of untouchable within the rotation, regardless of performance, regardless of effort, regardless of execution. And it feels like everybody else, when Jake's passing up open threes, Jake sees his role reduced. When Marcus is making costly turnovers late in games, Marcus's role is reduced. When Nick Smith and Dalton are getting lit up defensively and not remembering ATOs, their roles are reduced, right? When Jackson is picking up offensive fouls left and right, his role is reduced. But that's not been the case for some of the other guys. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, I think there is an element of like not wanting to lose those guys, because clearly DA cares about he's playing for his next contract. So that's like understandable. It's just, and that's where I did give JJ credit, and I want to give him credit again for benching him down the stretch of the first Memphis game. Like that was a step in the right direction of, he finally said, hey, if you're going to play like this, I'm not going to close a game with you. And that seemed to be a wake up call for everybody. So like from an actions perspective, I do want to acknowledge JJ, but it did feel like when he was talking about it, he sort of excused it as just like, well, he's not getting the ball, so it's understandable he's not going to rebound. And I'm like, that can't be the right answer here. That can't be the culture here of, if you don't get the ball, you could just take off games. Like that's not okay, in my opinion. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. LBJ and Luka looked way better last night. Encouraging. DA had like 2 rebounds at half. Unacceptable. Good news is the top of the West finally looks human. So I was with you at every point until the last point, just because I don't think the top of the West is human. Well, in the sense of right now, Wemby, Jokic, and Şengün are all injured. So it's like, I don't want to take away too much from San Antonio, Denver, and Houston all collectively losing recently. Like if, again, we saw this not too long ago, but you take Luka off the team. The Lakers are a weird exception because they do have two guys in LeBron and Austin who can assume much more usage and play at like a superstar level to the point to offset Luka's potential absence. And like that's the beauty of the Lakers' big three, is that if you miss one of them, the other two can both step up and replace that. Whereas most teams don't have that, right? Like Houston loses Şengün, it's like, okay, KD could do more. Then where are you getting your offense from, right? Like Reed Shepherd, Jabari Smith, okay, those guys can do a little bit more, but that's not the same as, hey, Luka's out, Austin, you do more, LeBron, you do more, or LeBron out, Luka, you do more, Austin, you do more. So the Lakers have an embarrassment of riches in terms of the top end offensive talent on their roster that they can, I think, survive some of that. But for these other teams, I mean, Denver's been without 4 of their 5 starters. They just got back Brown and Gordon. But like you're without Jokic, that's a lottery team, right? Like they're not a playoff team without Jokic. Houston, I would say similar thing, or maybe like a play-in team without Şengün. And then San Antonio has actually been pretty good without Wemby, but still he's their best player and had like finally played his way back in the starting lineup and like finally gotten into a rhythm. And then he ended up, getting injured again. So the only thing I would push back a little bit on here is I think the top of the West has looked human due to injuries. If you want to factor that in as like, that's why they're looking human, that's okay. But I think it'd be different if all 3 of those teams were like healthy and on a skid against bad teams, then that's a different story of, hey, these teams are going through something. They're not as good, but each of them is missing, in my opinion, their best player and a really important interior presence that like can't be replaced. So I think that's why those 3 teams in particular have been worse. But I agree. I mean, that's why 2 of my takeaways were LeBron and Luka, I think, have looked collectively much better, and that continues to trend upward. And then DA, again, I thought rough, like outside of the offense, I thought it was a rough first 3 quarters, and then he was much better defensively and on the glass in the fourth. Hydro, thoughts on Kobe Buffkin and him getting on a 2-way? I'm open to it. I would be cool with Kobe Buffkin. I think there is some overlap with Nick Smith in terms of just like player archetype of smaller scoring guard off the bench. And Nick Smith, I think, has earned a certain opportunity right now, but it doesn't mean Kobe Buffkin can't get an opportunity as well. For example, I think I would rather have Kobe Buffkin on a 2-way than Drew Timme. I know Drew Timme had some good performances last year with Brooklyn. I just think he's not good enough defensively, and there's just like a physicality limitation there that is just really difficult for an NBA level center, and you have to be at such a high level offensively to offset that I don't think he's quite at that level. So between those two, like I'd rather just have Buffkin and let him cook, see what he's got. But I think it's good. Like he was a guy the Lakers were previously interested in. I think it's good that they brought him into South Bay, and I think they should give him an opportunity on a 2-way. In general, as I've said before, I think the Lakers can use more scoring off the bench, but especially when they're depleted, like right now, I think it is an interesting opportunity. If Kobe Buffkin was on a 2-way, could he outplay Nick Smith and Dalton Connect and put up certain production off the bench? Like maybe. I think that's within the realm of possibility. One at full strength, I think it is sort of like they have the 3 high usage monsters. They have a few off ball, 2-way-ish players. And it's a collection of Marcus and Jake and Rui and Vando. And those guys are all like, 2-way guys in theory or like ideally. And then you have the centers with DA and Jackson. And like, that's the rotation, right? Like I don't see Kobe or Nick or Dalton or like that type of scoring guard cracking the rotation, especially because of the defensive end. I think more so even with Nick and Dalton. But I like Kobe Wolfkin, and I think I would rather have him on a two-way than Drew. Tom, thank you for the super chat. Watched Suns vs Thunder. Looks like letting go Goodwin is again an absolute fail by LAL's front office. Should have gave the second, traded Maxey and Gabe and kept him, or even waived Jackson and stretch his minimum contract. Yeah, I was against losing Jordan Goodwin. I mean, it's not even debatable. Like, he is a much better player than Dalton Connect or Bronny or Adu. And I get why the Lakers have kept those guys to, like, of course you paid money to acquire Adu, and he has a certain level of upside. And then Dalton, they've been holding out hope that he can rehab his trade value, and Bronny is player development, test case number one, as JJ said last year. And like, they've been trying to develop him, but for a group that does have a win now component to it to a degree, Jordan Goodwin is objectively, I mean, I think Jordan Goodwin's better than Gabe Vincent, just straight up, like, regardless of contract. So yeah, I mean, I think he could have been an 8th or 9th man on this team again, and given them something, especially in these like short-handed performances. But you just had a career high 26, hit 8 threes. Yeah. And this is another example of LA. I think that the front office has nailed a lot of the big stuff. The AD trade, the Luka trade, getting off the Westbrook contract when they did, and what that ultimate trade was that propelled them to the 2023 conference finals, some of the contracts that they've given out. But they've also really missed on this situation. 2 off seasons ago, could have had Gary Trent as a minimum guy if they were willing to waive Christian Wood or Cam Reddish, decided to hold out on that, then eventually had to waive those guys during the season and eat that money then. Also, the way they handled the Mo Bamba, Malik Beasley contracts and not extracting the most value out of that. So it's just been, there are a lot of the details that slip through the cracks that I think they have to get better at. Sen Payne, thank you for the super chat. Rui and Maxey to Detroit. They need Rui shooting bad. Tobias and LAL first to Miami. Wiggins in 2 seconds from Detroit back to LA. Gabe, DK 3 seconds to move. I like this. I mean, I've been on board with Rui and a first for Wiggins going back to the summer, and I'd be good with this. For a second, I saw Tobias in LAL first, and I was like, I hope that's not going to the Lakers. And then I read the rest of this question. But yeah, I mean, if I'm Detroit, I'm glad you could. Again, when we have the Rui conversation, I feel like sometimes it can be too negative, and it's really more so just a role and fit situation and what the Lakers need from that fifth guy. And like, it's just not really what Rui provides. But I think this is a perfect example of a situation that Rui would be an upgrade over. And like, for where Tobias is at in his career, I think Rui's a better player and would fit better with what Detroit has and needs. And I would like Rui. And I also think the nice thing, I mean, you got to figure out, because Rui and Duncan Robinson, I don't like love together in the front court, but I think there is a certain defensive culture and a lot of high motor athletes. And if it is Rui and Duncan Robinson, but you're surrounding them with Duran and Cade and Thompson, and then you're bringing in the athletes off the bench, I think Rui, again, like that's a nice example of a situation where Rui just has to go there and shoot, and maybe they run some post-ups or mismatch hunting for him, but it's like, be an offensive player and just buy into what we're doing defensively. And also, you'll probably be more of the 4th or 5th defender in most lineups. Whereas with the Lakers, they're asking him to be the 1st or 2nd defender in a lot of their core lineups. And that's a miss allocation of his defensive capabilities. So yeah, I like it from a Rui specific perspective of, I think he'd fit really well in Detroit and be an upgrade over Tobias, and also then have to do less defensively, which I think is the key to maximizing Rui. But for Miami, I don't know Tobias's contract off the top of my head. I think is he expiring? Yeah, Tobias is expiring. So Miami, you get a first and you get off that. Yeah, I think this is an interesting 3-team trade that I think all three would consider. Jay Spares, kind of my point though. We've been dealing with injuries. That's fair. That's totally fair. I think. And look, Lakers are without Austin, who I think we've seen how much they've missed Austin. Like I think Austin changes the dynamic of the offense to a real way. I think the only point I wanted to make is that I do believe in trying to contextualize things as properly as possible, and I think the Lakers are the exception in terms of being able to replace their usage to a certain degree that I think the other situations aren't as equipped to do. But then those other situations have different advantages and strengths over the Lakers, so that it just depends how you look at it. But yeah, I mean the Lakers are. We'll see what ends up happening if Wemby's back for that game on Wednesday. But like that's the game I'm looking at, especially if he is back. Of how do they fare against the Spurs? It is worth noting the Spurs are playing on Tuesday as well, so it is a back-to-back for both teams. And San Antonio is playing in Memphis, so they're going to be traveling similar distance. LA's in New Orleans, they're in Memphis, so relatively similar distances back to San Antonio. So neither team has a rest or travel or significant travel advantage over the other one. Mars Farts says, we were 3 seed last year, got beat in 5 by 6 seed. Doesn't really matter about seeding. It's about how you play versus other great teams, not the Memphis Grizzlies. Yeah. And look, like I'll be completely honest with you guys. And that's why I didn't even, I didn't really address this because I think it like goes without saying. The Lakers beating the Grizzlies, like this goes back to the point I made last week coming off of both the Houston game and the Detroit game of I'm still in like show me mode with the Lakers against good teams. Like I'm not judging this team on beating the Grizzlies twice. I'm not judging this team on beating Sacramento. Those are teams they should beat. And frankly, those are teams they should beat. Sacramento was a different, like they eventually blew that game open. But with Memphis, like I think both of the, like there was some concerning things. I didn't really touch on like the first half. They gave up 10. Memphis had 10 of their 16 offensive rebounds in the first half. They had 11 of their 18 second chance points in the first half. They were killing they were up by 15 at one point, right? So this was not like a wire to wire, like good performance from the Lakers. They were down basically until the 7-8 minute mark of the fourth. And they rallied in that second half and then eventually out executed Memphis in crunch time. But yeah, I mean, it was not like the two most convincing wins. It was not the best opponent. It continued some of LA's trends with turnovers, offensive rebounds, poor shooting, like struggling in the half court when they're not getting to the free throw line, giving up transition baskets. Like there was still a lot of things that went wrong that have been trends for the Lakers all season. I didn't want to like lead with that because I'm like, hey, they've won 3 of 4. They've won 2 in a row. They're finally like at least winning and turning things around from that perspective. So I didn't want to be a wet blanket Debbie Downer. But certainly I agree with you. Like I care way more about how they play against Houston and Detroit and San Antonio than I do about Memphis or Milwaukee or Sacramento. Like they should beat those teams. And that's just the standard that they're at right now. They should beat mediocre to bad teams. It's just how do they fare against the good teams? And that's the thing I'm most interested in moving forward. Luis, got to give this team credit for beating the bad teams when Denver, Houston, and San Antonio have had some bad beats this season. That's fair. I think I'm looking at it more so just from a Lakers perspective of ideally you're OKC and with the exception of San Antonio, OKC has beaten all the bad teams. They've killed all the bad teams. And then they've also beaten a lot of the good teams. And you want to do both. My only like pushback to this would just be like, I agree that those teams have had some bad losses in that sense. But when you look at how they fared against some of the better teams, that's where it's like, again, like I'll say it this way. If you have 251 teams, right? Like same record, let's just even say same net rating, same point differential, I'm going to have more confidence in the team that has had a lot more statement wins and beaten the best teams convincingly compared to the team that beat up on all the mediocre and bad teams and lost a lot of the matchups to the good teams, right? Because the Lakers are not playing Memphis in the playoffs. They're not playing Sacramento in the playoffs. They're not playing Milwaukee in the playoffs, right? They're playing Denver, Houston, and San Antonio and OKC and maybe Phoenix and maybe Minnesota. And right now they've only fared well against Minnesota among that group, right? So they're 0-1 against OKC, 1-1 against San Antonio, 0-1 against Houston, 1-2 against Phoenix, and then 2-0 against Minnesota. So it's like, I care more about that because those are the teams they're playing, right? So yes, I do agree that like beating the bad teams, it helps your net rating, it helps your point differential, it helps stack up wins, it helps you have a certain seeding. But if LA can't beat the good teams, they can beat all the bad teams in the world. They're going to lose in the first round, right? Like that's the thing I'm sort of concerned with here, that I want to start seeing them stack up good wins against good teams rather than just barely beating mediocre to bad teams, if that makes sense. Green Light, thank you for the super chat. I bet we will get Herb Jones. Would you rather have Gafford or DA at center if Luka could have 35 points per game and Lakers are in third place equals MVP? Okay, a couple questions here, or a few. Herb, we'll see. I've been on record saying I think there's an element of chicken being played right now, but between LA and New Orleans, and in terms of just the price for Herb, and I think Trey Murphy is not realistic. I think his price is even higher than Herb's, but that would be the best case scenario, in my opinion, for LA. Is Herb helps you in the now and in the future, fits the age timeline with Luka and Austin. I think that would be a home run if LA was able to pull that off. Gafford versus DA is interesting. I think DA is more skilled and talented and productive offensively. At the same time, I think Gafford has the track record with Luka, and we saw what that did. Now, I also think it's worth noting that like Lively was a big part of the center mix as well, and Lively would often be closing games or sometimes be outplaying Gafford. So Gafford was at times more of like a placeholder starter than the primary starter. There's also been I talked about this when I looked at Gafford last year as a potential trade target. They've like oddly, just for whatever reason, he's often been a like low to mid 20s guy. He's never really played more than that. And I don't know if that's like a health thing or what, but he has dealt with some injury stuff. And, I think there's a difference between Gafford at like 22 minutes a night versus DA at 30 minutes a night. So I would like to have a little, like, to be honest, in theory, I would lean Gafford, but I want to see what the next month looks like. And like up to this point in the season, I think DA has been better. I still have a little bit of a sour taste from the past week or so, and sort of where that potentially goes in the future. If Luka averages 35 a game and the Lakers are third, I think it's going to be between him and Shea for MVP. I think it also depends on if OKC wins 70, especially with Jokic theoretically being out of the mix now, depending on how long he misses, and Giannis is probably out of the mix due to how much he missed. Wemby, I think, is out of the mix by almost process of elimination. It's like I almost only can see Shea or Luka winning MVP. The issue is just if Shea wins 70 games, I think they're going to give it like, and you could argue he earned it, right? Like if you win 70 games, that's a historic season. I don't think 74-8 is going to happen with some of their recent losses adding up, but yeah, I mean, I don't even think he has to be at 35. I think if he's at 32, 33, which I think is completely reasonable with his production, I think it's more so where is LA. I think second is within the realm of possibility. Like I would probably bet on San Antonio being second, but LA has a shot to be second. But yeah, if they're top three and Luka's having a career year or at least leading the league in scoring and putting up near career best numbers in a lot of categories, like I think Luka should be in the mix. I just think at this point, a lot of like it's sort of become a two-man race, and between Shea and Jokic, and one of the guys is now likely dropping out due to the games played situation. So then that in theory makes, like, I think Shea's the heavy favorite right now, but for Luka to overcome that, I do agree that this is probably the blueprint of averaging low to mid 30s and LA being a top 3 seed. So I don't think it equals MVP, like, no brainer. Just thinking about how people, like how the straw poll has gone, and that is pretty indicative. Like Luka was a distant, I forgot if he was third or fourth in the straw poll, but there was a big gap between Shea and Jokic and everybody else. And at least my read on the situation right now, based on talking to people, I think Shea would be the heavy favorite. Civic Citizen, we're going to sign a 15th man. Do we have money for it yet? Not yet. Lakers have until January 19th, or January 19th is the day that the prorated amount becomes enough for LA to sign. So it's going to be interesting to see what they potentially do with that. Like, I think Nick Smith is a potential contender there, but is there someone who gets bought out? Is there someone who's out there that maybe makes a little bit more sense? But I think if you can add Nick Smith to the roster, and also remember, like with Jordan Goodwin, they didn't add him until the final couple days of the season. Like it does financially make some sense to wait that out. But if you add, and you don't have to do it on January 19th, and you could also see how the trade deadline plays out, where maybe you end up flipping Gabe, you don't get another guard back, and you're like, hey, we want Nick Smith to replace the Gabe role. Like that could be a possibility. Just so you guys know, I have a hard out at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I am doing Spectrum today, so I got to head over there and do the podcast and then the show. So I will be wrapping here at 1 p.m. Hard out. X-Ray, thank you for the super chat. Do good teams look at the Lakers as a good team? This is a good question. At least in the conversations I've had, like, yes, but I think people view them more as most people I talk to view them as somewhere between the 4th to 6th best team in the West. And depending on how you tier the West, that's either a tier 2 or tier 3 West contender. So I don't like, I think at this point, most people I talk to in the league, it's like OKC is clearly number 1. Almost everybody has Denver number 2. Then a lot of people now have moved it to San Antonio and Houston at 3-4, and then LA at 5-6 with Minnesota. Some people are skeptical of San Antonio or Houston, and then might have like LA or Minnesota at like 4, and then one of those teams a little bit lower. But I would say that the general consensus right now, if you were doing a straw poll on how people view the Lakers, I think most people would have them probably 5th behind OKC, Denver, Houston, and San Antonio in some order. But I think most people have OKC and Denver top 2. Sorry, I was checking some texts quickly. My phone was blowing up. To Sizzle, Lakers could be anywhere from 3 to 10 any given night. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, I would even, 10 is a little low. I would say LA could be anywhere from like 2 to 7 on any given night. Maybe 3 to 7, depending on, like, I'm very interested to see how they match up with Denver at full strength, because I actually think Denver might be the team that's the most beatable to them, or the team they have the best odds of beating among those top 4 or 5, right? Because I just think Houston and San Antonio and OKC have such an athleticism and speed advantage against them that it's like, I don't know how they make that up. And we've just seen that the Lakers really struggle against those types of teams. And, I know even the San Antonio matchup, like I know they beat them earlier, but for those who have followed San Antonio, like their season dramatically shifted after De'Aaron Fox returned, and De'Aaron Fox obviously did not play in that game. So, I mean, De'Aaron Fox has been, I feel like he might be the most underrated guard in the NBA. Like he was, I think, in that top 20, 25 mix a couple years ago. And since then, he's obviously been injured and playing in Sacramento and whatnot. But like De'Aaron Fox is a stud. And the way he looked against the Lakers that game, the way he's looked against OKC, like I think that was a really big absence from that game. Lakers obviously were without Austin and LeBron. So, but then we saw when both teams are closer to full strength, how that game went. So I'm curious to see how they match up with Denver, because I think that's the team that they probably match up best with. But I do not love the OKC, Houston, or San Antonio matchups. I think those three teams are just kind of a nightmare for LA's offense and also defense. Green light, thank you for the super chat. Would you sign and trade AR for Nah and Dyson Daniels? That's interesting. I don't think I would. So I'll say this. I don't think the Lakers would. As for me, that it is interesting because I do really like Dyson Daniels. I think the one thing I continue to say with, the other version of this AR for a couple guys has been AR for Murphy and Herb Jones. And the one thing I will continue to believe in, and I'm not saying AR has to be the second guy, but I think Luka operates best with another high-level shot creator and playmaker. We've seen it with pre-New York Jalen Brunson. We saw it with Kyrie. I think there's a reason why Luka and AR, those lineups have crushed opponents. It's been obviously a bit up and down since LeBron returned, but when it is just Luka and Austin, those lineups have tended to perform really, really well. And I just think having that secondary shot creator playmaker really does a lot for Luka. Now, he does need defense and athleticism, and that's the core question here of Austin's offense versus the defense of Nah and Daniels collectively. It's really interesting, right? Because you could argue Daniels is as good defensively as Austin is offensively. You could argue he's maybe even better defensively than Austin is offensively. But my one thing would then be, again, similar to the Herb Trey Murphy conversation. You need to go find that secondary player offensively. And specifically, I think a secondary player who could then scale up to being a primary player when Luka's off the floor, or if Luka ever misses time. That's a very specific player. That's a hard player to find. And like that could do it at the highest levels. And look, we don't even know if Austin could do it at the highest levels. I have an idea of what he could do, but we'll still need more of a sample size to see what he does in this postseason. But it's an interesting one. I don't think the Lakers would do it. Again, I continue to say and report that like if the Lakers are giving up Austin, I think they want to trade up if they're giving up Austin, not trade down, right? So I don't think they want to split up Austin's production and value into a couple players. They want to, I think that's why when I mentioned the Giannis stuff, it's like, okay, if you flip Austin into Giannis, that's obviously trading up. Austin for Nah and Daniels, or Austin for Trey and Herb, is technically trading down, as in you're giving up the best player in the trade and you're splitting that asset into a couple pieces. Now, we could debate whether that makes more sense or not, but my understanding with the Lakers and how they would approach a potential Austin trade is if they want to trade Austin, or if they're going to trade Austin, they want to be trading Austin for a better player, and ideally a better fitting player, but like a better player. And I think that's a pretty short list of like 25 to 30 guys. And most of the time, Austin's being included in some of these trades. Those are not the guys he's being mentioned with. 5 more minutes here. DJJ, thank you for the super chat. Also, Sadiq Bey starting caliber, he'd be a win. Okay, wait, I missed one from, I missed a couple. So actually, I'll go back to the original one from DJJ. Would you do the Wiggins deal knowing what you know now? Rob basically thought a bench rotation player and non-rotation player was too much to give up. P.S. I knew who these guys were in the summer. Like, are you talking about Rui, Dalton, and a first? I think, yeah. I mean, I would do that, but I also err on the side of being a little bit more aggressive. I also am a little bit more skeptical of LA's options this summer. I think it's easy to be like, hey, keep the 3 picks, like. But when you look at the free agent class and you look at which stars are currently available, or like even like, okay, sure. So there's Giannis, right? I don't even know if the Lakers have enough to get Giannis. Part of that, especially in the summer, would be Austin signing off on a sign-in trade, which I do not think Austin's going to sign off on a sign-in trade to go to Milwaukee. So that makes that really difficult. But then look at some of the other stars who are projected to be available going into the deadline or this summer. Do you really want Trae Young or Ja Morant or LaMelo Ball or Kawhi Leonard or James Harden or Jaren Jackson Jr. or Darius Garland or Jared Allen? Like, none of these guys really move the needle for me in a serious way. Half those guys would not fit next to Luka. And then half those guys I don't think are like the missing piece or like elevate LA to a certain level, especially if it's costing you either LeBron and or Austin. So I'm a little bit skeptical on the, like, look, they've pulled a rabbit out of the hat before with the Luka trade, which nobody saw coming. So certainly there could be something in the works that we just don't know about. And if Rob Pelinka could pull a second, I mean, there's not going to be a second Luka trade, but if he could pull a second like monster trade out of thin air, then we need to start having a different discussion with Rob and how he moves. But I think, you know, it again is kind of along the lines of LA continuing to kick the can down the road, and I don't love that. Sorry, not sure what just happened there. Hope we don't have a Wi-Fi gate part 3 here. But Rui, I just don't think is a long-term fit with Luka and Austin. I think there will always be a limitation there of you basically need 2 all defense guys at the other 2 spots in your starting group. And I think that's really hard to find. And then Dalton, I think, frankly, might be headed out of the league soon, to be completely honest with how he's looking. And then the first, again, I think Wiggins is a better player and better fit. Then DJJ also notes Saddiq Bey, starting caliber, he'd be a win. I really like Saddiq Bey. I do view him more as a bench guy. Now, in the context of him next to Jake and Marcus, could you argue for him as a starter? Potentially. I still would probably prefer to start one of those guys and bring Saddiq off the bench, especially because he is a guy who could get hot offensively, and I like that skill set a little bit more with the bench group. But if Saddiq, to the earlier part of or question of KCP, Saddiq Bey, I like. Those are not like my plan A or plan B or necessarily even plan C, but they're better than like the status quo. And if you could add them for the right price, I'm totally on board with that. Bowen, thank you for the super chat. How do we get Luka, AR, and LeBron to a lesser extent to basically play fewer minutes, usage down a bit? I'm worried about the continued risk for injury. I'm with you. This has been something I've been clamoring all season about. Like, because I think it's one thing, and this is a real thing in terms of LA not being able to close teams out, right? Because when you have a game where you're up 10-15 and you blow a lead in the fourth, and now all of a sudden it's in crunch time and you guys have to close, that's workload and minutes and mileage that they just don't need to have on their body ideally. And I also think JJ has not been very trusting of the bench. Of like, there have been games where the Lakers have a certain, even in some of their blowouts or like double digit wins, where he will play Luka or Austin or LeBron deeper into the fourth quarter than I think most teams would play their best players when the game is decided. So I think it's a combination of like JJ has to be a little bit, and I don't know if JJ is trying to like, you know, keep the point differential or net rating at a certain amount and like make their statistical profile better, as crazy as that sounds. Like, I would not like, I think he wants to improve that and not be in the negative or basically at zero like they've been for a lot of the season. I don't know what it is, but I think it has, like, I know one thing with Luka. Luka likes to play a certain amount. Luka likes to play a lot. He does not want to be on the bench. So there's also like the competitive dynamic here of getting through to some of these guys of like, I know you want to play a certain amount. I know you don't like resting or sitting, but it's what's best for you longer term, at least, over the course of the season. So it's not got to be much. Again, I think it's not, it's like 2 to 3 minutes, but that adds up. That adds up. So I think it's got to be JJ being a little bit more trusting with the bench and also getting through to these guys like, hey, we need you to play a little bit less here. The usage I'm okay with. Like, I think the way the roster is constructed, you're just going to have a certain amount of usage with those three. And then final one here before I wrap, because I've already gone a couple minutes over. Patrick, thank you for the super chat. Jovan Buha. Who are your top 5 MCs of all time? Rappers. Also, would you trade Rui and Gabe for Miles Bridges and another player? Sexton or Man? Great show. Thank you. I appreciate it. So my top 5 is a little tricky because it depends if we're going like, because music is more subjective than objective, right? It's not like with basketball, we can look at stats, we can look at accolades, we can look at championships, and we can have a clearer sense of Michael Jordan was better than Clyde Drexler, right? And you have the definitive, like, beat him in the finals, all the accolades, the championships, etc. With MCs, it's obviously subjective to a degree. So I have like 2 different answers here. I have who are my top 5 like favorite, and who are my top 5 probably like in terms of actual like technical. So I mean, top 5. I'll just go with the technical side of it. I would say for me, I got to start. I think Biggie might be my favorite rapper of all time in terms of like just his flow and rhythm. But I would say Biggie, Tupac, Eminem, Andre 3000, and Black Thought. Those are probably like my 5 favorite or top 5 MCs. I mean, again, you could throw in Nas, you could throw in Jay-Z. As much as it pains me, I think Kendrick has gone up into that conversation as well. But those would probably be my 5: Biggie, Tupac, Eminem, Andre 3000, and Black Thought. And then I think for my favorite, though, I would probably say, I mean, you guys know I'm a Drake guy, so Drake is number 1. I would say Drake, Biggie, pre 2004 Eminem, pre 2017 Kanye, and then my sleeper pick is The Game, but that's also probably pre 2008, 2010 ish. So those are probably like the 5 rappers I've listened the most to. But and then the second part of this, Rui and Gabe for Bridges and another player, Sexton or Man. Sure. I mean, I would not give up a first round pick. I've said this before. I will continue to say this every single time I talk about Miles Bridges. There is a PR element of some questions you have to answer with his past and what he's been through and his character and whatnot. And those are real things that the Lakers would have to address and weigh. And they had to address those things when they added Jackson Hayes as well, for example. But especially if you could get Sexton, I would really like Bridges and Sexton in place of Rui and Gabe. And Bridges obviously has the clutch connection with LeBron and whatnot. But with all that said, I'm going to wrap here. I do have to go. I appreciate you guys for rocking with me on a midday show. Put up some big numbers today, so I'm still going to be doing primarily post games, but this month I will be traveling at the end of the month. I'm also moving at the end of the month, so there might be a few games in that mix where I end up doing the day after rather than the night of. But appreciate you guys for rocking with me. Shout out to the midday gang. Shout out to the late night gang. And for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow night after Lakers Pelicans. I will talk to you then. Eric Dane says, you forgot Busta Rhymes. That is fair. He is worthy of including. One of my favorites also of all, I mean, Ice Cube, Eazy-E. There's a lot of classics, but yeah, even I hate, like, I give props where props are due. Pusha T is also up there, unfortunately for me as well, but appreciate you guys, and shout out to the late night gang. Talk to you all tomorrow.